This is part 2 of our lecture on photosynthesis in chapter 10 in your textbook. So we left off talking about the two types of reactions that occur in photosynthesis, the light reactions and the Calvin cycle, or the light independent reactions. And so I want to take a look at those in relation to the basic equation that we use for photosynthesis and where everything fits in terms of the reactants and the products. So first of all, looking at the CO2, or actually we can even back up and look at the energy that is on the reactant part of the equation. So if we look at the energy, we have light coming in to the chloroplast, and it's going to obviously be part of the light reactions in photosynthesis. And we'll talk more in detail about what happens to that light energy. But essentially the next reactant is going to be CO2. And CO2 actually is not used until the second part of photosynthesis, which is in the Calvin cycle. So you can see CO2 is going to enter through the leaves, stomata, and it's going to enter the Calvin cycle and be fixed to eventually into the building blocks for sugar. The other thing that we need in terms of reactants is water, and water is going to be part of light reactions. It's actually a very important part of how light reactions begin in the process of photosynthesis. And then our products are going to be coming out again in two different areas. So first of all, the sugar, in this case we're using the basic formula for glucose, it's going to be coming out of the Calvin cycle. And we'll talk again in more detail about how that occurs. And then the other product we have is oxygen, which is actually going to come out in the light reactions, so you can see here. So it's important for you to study where the reactants and products of our basic photosynthetic reaction are entering and exiting a chloroplast. And the other thing that we can look at here with this diagram is the fact that CO2 here is becoming reduced into a sugar molecule. And again, that is occurring in this Calvin cycle, and it's occurring with the help of the NADPH that is being produced in the light reaction. So the NADPH is going to be donating electrons into the Calvin cycle to provide the energy for this endergonic reduction of CO2 into a sugar molecule. And then the other side, we have the splitting of water occurring here. So we have water entering in the light reactions. And what's going to occur is a splitting of that water and the release of some electrons from the hydrogen protons. And then the end product is the oxidation of oxygen over here. And then the oxygen obviously is going to come out as a gas. So we're going to take time out here to watch a quick video that's going to animate some of these concepts.
Plants provide us with food to eat and oxygen to breathe. They perform this amazing feat by the process of photosynthesis. Let's take a closer look. Photosynthesis requires carbon dioxide, which diffuses into the leaf through small pores and then enters the cells. Inside the cell, carbon dioxide diffuses into the chloroplasts, where photosynthesis takes place. Chloroplasts use energy from light to transform carbon dioxide and water into sugar and oxygen. Zooming into a chloroplast, we see these flattened membranous sacs called thylakoids. Here, light energy is converted to chemical energy in the first phase of photosynthesis, the light reactions. The two green structures you see here are photosystems, large complexes of proteins and chlorophyll that capture light energy. An electron transport chain connects the two photosystems. Notice the small mobile electron electrons flow down the electron transport chain, releasing energy that is used to pump hydrogen ions, the blue balls, into the thylakoid. In the photosystem on the right, light energy excites electrons, and this time the electrons are captured by an electron carrier molecule, NADPH. The high concentration of hydrogen ions inside the thylakoid powers ATP synthase, producing ATPs. The light reactions in the thylakoid have produced two energy products, ATP and NADPH, that will now power the production of sugar in the Calvin cycle. The Calvin cycle takes place outside the thylakoids in the stroma, the thick fluid of the chloroplast. At the beginning of the cycle, carbon dioxide molecules combine with molecules called RUBP. The resulting molecules go through a series of reactions powered by ATP and NADPH from the light reactions. Sugar molecules known as G3Ps are produced. Most of the G3Ps are rearranged back into RUBPs that will begin the Calvin cycle again. But the important product of photosynthesis is the remaining G3P sugar. Some G3Ps are used to build glucose, which can combine into starch or cellulose. Still other G3Ps form sucrose. And some of the sugar is broken down by cellular respiration using oxygen in the plant's own mitochondria, generating ATPs that can power other work of the plant. Excess oxygen diffuses out of the leaf through the pores, while more carbon dioxide enters. With three simple ingredients, carbon dioxide, water, and light, plants produce sugar and oxygen by photosynthesis, powering plant metabolism and ultimately providing your fuel as well.
So, starting section 10.2, the light reactions convert solar energy to the chemical energy of ATP and NADPH. So we're going to actually look at how chloroplasts are basically solar-powered chemical factories, and how within the thylakoid membrane we have that production of ATP and NADPH. So we're going to start here with the light reactions. So we have the beginning here where light is captured by the thylakoid membrane, and in particular what's occurring is within the membrane we have photosystems that are able to capture that light, and then our product in this case is going to be oxygen and ATP, which has been converted from ADP with the addition of an inorganic phosphate to become ATP, and then an electron has been added to the NADP ion here to make it NADPH. So looking more carefully here at the electron transport chain, which is the ETC that you see here, we're going to look at what is happening. So essentially you need to be familiar not so much with every single step and molecule that's involved, but some of the big players you do need to be familiar with. So one of them is the photosystem 2, which we find right here at the beginning, and photosystem 1, which is here in the middle. And you need to be familiar with this cytochrome complex, which is involved in the electron transport chain, and also with ATP synthase. So these big parts of the electron transport chain are important for you to be familiar with. The other place where we need to focus in is in the thylakoid space, and we'll look at what's going on in there as well. So now we're going to look more carefully at, just a second here. Oops. Hold on just a second. So the first part of that light reaction is going to require the pigments of photosynthesis, or the pigments found in plants, to actually do the absorbing of that light energy. So again, looking at a macro to micro view of the chloroplasts, you can see the stack of thylakoids, then the cluster of pigment molecules that are embedded within the membrane of the thylakoid, and then there's actually the chemical structure of those pigments. So we have a few different types of pigments in leaves. We have chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. We also have things called carotenoids and alkaloids, which are things that also act as pigments in photosynthesis. These different pigments are embedded in the thylakoid membrane, and together they make up what we call the photosystem. And the way that they're structured together actually allows what we call the electron transport chain, which is a structural passing on of electrons from molecule to molecule. It's actually relying on that structure and the placement of those different pigments and proteins within the thylakoid membrane. Looking at light, we have the spectrum of color, which is our visible light. So when we see white light, as you already know, I'm sure, it's actually a mixture of all these different colors of light, ranging from the blues to the reds. And that's considered our visible light. And what makes each of these different colors different is the actual wavelength of the light that we are seeing. So visible light is between the wavelengths of 380 and 750 nanometers. And the shorter the wavelength, the higher the energy available from that type of light energy. So what does a plant use in terms of that spectrum of light? What it uses is what we call an absorption spectra. And we find that we can actually look at the graph here on the bottom and find particular wavelengths of light that the different pigments work best at and can actually absorb. So the energy that's going to be used is not energy that's reflected, but it's light that's actually able to be absorbed by the pigment. So you can see, looking at the graph down below here, that chlorophyll A likes to or is able to absorb light best in the blue range and also in the red range. So chlorophyll A is shown here by this blue line, and you can see here in the violet blue end of the spectrum, which is our high energy end. And then down again in the red area, chlorophyll A can absorb light there. Chlorophyll B is just slightly different, but it does use a different wavelength. And it uses more of the blues, going from purple to blue here. And also it can absorb light in this red-orange area. And then I mentioned before an auxiliary pigment that is used in photosynthesis to absorb light energy are the carotenoids. And they actually absorb light also in this blue, but they're actually starting to move into the little bit into the green area. So they're in the bluish area. So again, chlorophyll A absorbs best in the red and blue wavelengths. And you'll notice all of them have the least absorption of light in the green area, green and yellow.